The sun had barely begun its ascent over the sleepy town of Millwood when chaos threatened to shatter its quietude. A town where everyone knew each other's names, where the past seemed to cling to the present like a shadow. It was here that the inexplicable unfolded, a mystery that would grip the community and remain unsolved for more than a decade. On the morning of June 17, 2009, in a small modest home on the outskirts of town, life was about to take an unimaginable turn for the Parker family. Emma Parker, a woman known for her resilience and unwavering optimism despite their financial struggles, was busy packing lunches for her two young children. Her husband, Tom Parker, a dedicated factory worker and a devoted father, was preparing for another long day at the mill. The Parkers were a family like any other, bound by love and shared dreams of a better future. Tom, with his rugged hands and gentle eyes, was a man of few words but endless devotion. He was the kind of husband who would surprise Emma with wildflowers picked from the side of the road, who would spend his weekends constructing tree houses for his kids, despite his weary bones. Their life was simple, but it was theirs. As the clock struck 7:30 a.m., Tom kissed his children goodbye, promising to return by dinner. It was a promise he had never broken until that day. Emma watched him drive away, a smile on her lips, unaware it would be the last time she saw him. Hours passed, and when the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Parker home, Tom was nowhere to be found. Emma's calls went unanswered, her texts unread. Her heart raced with a growing sense of dread. By nightfall, concern turned into panic. Emma dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported her husband's disappearance. The operator's voice was calm, reassuring, but Emma's mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. This was not like Tom. He was dependable, predictable. Something was terribly wrong. As officers scoured the town, combing through every nook and cranny, whispers began to echo through Millwood. How could a man vanish without a trace? The factory foreman confirmed Tom had clocked out on time. No one had seen him since. Weeks turned into months, then years. Leads dried up, and the case grew cold. For Emma, life became a haunting cycle of hope and despair. She clung to the belief that Tom was still out there somewhere, until one ordinary day in 2021, while weaving through the bustling market, Emma stopped dead in her tracks. Her heart skipped a beat as she spotted a familiar figure across the crowd. It was Tom, unmistakably him. But before she could call out, he looked directly at her, panic flashing in his eyes, and fled. Emma stood frozen, caught between disbelief and heartbreak. The man she had mourned, the husband she had yearned for, was alive. But why had he run? The question lingered like a spectre, demanding answers. Emma's trembling hand reached for her phone. It was time to make another call. Emma's fingers fumbled with her phone, her heart pounding in her chest like a wild drum. The market buzzed around her, oblivious to the storm that had just erupted in her life. She dialed the same number she had so many years ago, her voice cracking with a mixture of hope and fear. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was steady, a lifeline in the chaos. I saw him, Emma stammered, her eyes darting across the crowd, searching for any sign of Tom. My husband, Tom Parker. He's alive. He's here at the market, but he ran when he saw me. The operator's calm demeanor did not falter. Ma'am, can you describe his appearance for us? What was he wearing? Emma closed her eyes, trying to recall every detail. Blue jacket, gray jeans. He looked different, older, but it was him. I'm sure of it. We'll dispatch officers to your location immediately. Stay where you are and try to keep an eye on him if you can. As Emma hung up, her mind raced back to the day Tom disappeared. It was a day like any other, filled with the mundane rhythms of life in Millwood. Tom had been a dedicated worker, a loving husband, and a doting father. His disappearance had shattered their small world, leaving a void that nothing could fill. Tom had left for work that morning like he always did. He had even reminded Emma to pick up milk on her way back from the store. And then he was gone. No trace, no clues, only questions that haunted Emma day and night. The police had launched a full-scale investigation, but every lead hit a dead end. Tom's car was found abandoned on a quiet country road, keys still in the ignition, as if he had simply stepped out for a moment. Witnesses were scarce and no one could recall seeing anything unusual. Emma remembered the nights spent pacing the floor, wearing a path into the carpet, waiting for a call that never came. Their children, too young to understand, had asked for their father every night, their innocent inquiries piercing her heart like arrows. The initial investigation had been thorough but flawed. Miscommunications and assumptions had led the detectives astray. They had focused on the idea of a voluntary disappearance, though Emma had insisted otherwise. Tom loved his family too much to leave them without a word. Now standing in the market, the revelation that Tom was alive brought a strange mix of relief and betrayal. Why had he stayed away, and why run now, when he had a chance to come home? Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of police officers, their presence a reminder that this nightmare was far from over. She pointed them in the direction Tom had fled, but the bustling market offered countless places to hide. As the officers began their search, Emma's mind lingered on the last day she had seen Tom. It was a memory she had replayed countless times, searching for answers in every detail. But now, with the knowledge that he was alive, the questions only multiplied. The officers' voices crackled through their radios, and Emma's heart sank with each passing minute. Tom had vanished once more, leaving behind a trail of questions that demanded answers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the market, Emma knew that this was only the beginning. She had found Tom, but the mystery of his disappearance was far from solved, and the truth, buried beneath years of silence, awaited discovery. The market, once bustling with the late afternoon crowd, slowly emptied as dusk settled in. Emma stood at the edge of the street, her eyes scanning the dwindling figures, hoping against hope for a glimpse of Tom. The police officers continued their search, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. The first 48 hours after Emma's sighting of Tom would be crucial, yet the chaos of the market had already set the investigation on a precarious path. Detective Harris, leading the case, approached Emma, his expression a mix of determination and concern. "We've got officers canvassing the area. We'll need a detailed description of what you saw," he said, his voice steady but hurried. Emma nodded, her mind racing back to that brief, heart-stopping moment. He was wearing a dark jacket, a cap. I almost didn't recognize him, but it was him, I know it. Harris scribbled notes, glancing up occasionally to catch Emma's eye. "Did he say anything to you? Did he look different in any way?" Emma hesitated, recalling the fleeting expression on Tom's face. "He looked scared, almost like he didn't want to be seen." The detective nodded, understanding the weight of what Emma was conveying. Meanwhile, nearby, officers questioned market vendors and passers-by, their voices a soft murmur against the backdrop of the cooling night. One vendor, an elderly man who had been selling flowers for decades, scratched his head thoughtfully. "I did see a man running, but I thought nothing of it. People are always in a rush these days." A younger woman, balancing a basket of oranges, chimed in. "He bumped into me, didn't even stop to apologize, just kept moving like he was running from something." Despite these snippets, no clear trail emerged. The initial police response, while swift, was hampered by the sheer number of people in the market that day. Every minute felt like sand slipping through fingers. The family gathered at home, the air thick with a mix of hope and anxiety. Emma's sister, a pillar of support since Tom's disappearance, sat beside her. "Do you think he's in trouble, Emma? What if he needs help?" Emma shook her head, frustration edging into her voice. "I don't know. All these years, I imagined 1,000 scenarios, but nothing prepared me for this." The children, now teenagers, lingered by the door, their expressions a mirror of confusion and curiosity. They had grown up with only stories of their father, and now the possibility of his return seemed both thrilling and terrifying. Meanwhile, Detective Harris and his team pored over the original case files. The early assumption of voluntary disappearance had left gaping holes in the investigation. Key witnesses had never been thoroughly questioned, and potential leads were prematurely closed. Harris knew they needed to revisit every aspect, from financial records to Tom's known associates. The first 48 hours were slipping away, and with them, vital opportunities to unravel the tangled web of Tom's past and present. As night deepened, the sense of urgency grew. Emma lay awake, her mind a tumult of questions. Where had Tom been all these years? Why had he stayed away? And most importantly, where was he now? The silence of the house was interrupted by a call that sent a jolt through Emma. It was Detective Harris, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. "Emma, we might have something. A witness thinks they saw Tom near the old railway station. We're heading there now." Emma's heart raced. The railway station, long abandoned, was a place of memories from their early days together. It was as if Tom was leading them through the past, step by step. With a new lead in hand, the investigation took on a renewed vigor. But as Emma prepared to join the search, a chilling thought settled in her mind. Was Tom really trying to be found, or was he leading them on a different path entirely? The frigid night air wrapped around Emma as she hurriedly dressed and slipped out the door, her heart pounding with a blend of hope and dread. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional distant hum of a passing car. The old railway station loomed large in her memory, a relic of their past entwined with laughter and whispered dreams. At the station, Detective Harris and his team combed the area with flashlights, casting long, wavering shadows. The air was thick with anticipation, every rustle of leaves and creak of old boards a potential clue. Harris turned to Emma as she approached, his expression a mixture of determination and empathy. "Emma, we've spoken to a few locals. One of them swears they saw someone fitting Tom's description lingering near the tracks earlier today," he explained, his words clipped and urgent. "But we need more than a sighting. We need something concrete." Emma nodded, her thoughts swirling. "Tom loved this place. We used to come here to watch trains when we first moved to the area, but why now? Why return?" As the question hung in the air, Harris motioned for her to follow him to a nearby bench, its surface worn and splintered. "Emma, I need to ask you, did Tom have any connections, any reason to hide, anything you might have overlooked?" Her gaze drifted to the tracks, the past unraveling in her mind. "He was always secretive about work, said it was better that way for us, for the family. But I never pushed, I trusted him." Harris nodded, his brow furrowing. "We need to dig deeper into his past. There's something here we're not seeing." As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, another officer approached with a small object, wrapped in a handkerchief. "Detective, we found this near the platform," he said, revealing a faded photograph. A younger Emma and Tom, arms entwined, smiles wide, the railway station in the background. Emma's breath caught. "This is from the summer of '98. I didn't know he kept it." The discovery reignited the urgency in the investigation. Emma's mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Was Tom leaving breadcrumbs, or was this a goodbye? Back at the station, Harris regrouped his team. "We need to re-interview everyone who was here today. Someone must have seen something more." Meanwhile, Emma's phone buzzed with messages from her children, their concern palpable even through the screen. "Mom, is Dad okay?" one read, and her heart ached at the uncertainty she couldn't dispel. As the morning unfolded, so did the investigation. The initial 48 hours were crucial, yet fraught with missteps. Officers who had dismissed Tom's disappearance as voluntary years ago now scrambled to piece together a life that had been meticulously hidden. A local shopkeeper, initially overlooked, mentioned casually to an officer that a man resembling Tom had been seen frequently in the area over the past few months, sometimes buying basic supplies, always paying in cash. This thread, tenuous yet promising, offered a glimmer of hope. Emma sat with Detective Harris, the weight of the years pressing down heavily. "Do you think he's in danger, or does he think we are?" Harris, ever the realist, met her gaze. "Emma, I wish I could say for sure. But what I do know is that every clue, every lead, brings us closer to the truth." The clock ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder of time slipping away. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the tracks, the team prepared to fan out, determined to unravel the mystery of Tom's disappearance and his sudden reappearance before it was too late. But as Emma watched them go, a lingering question echoed in her mind. Was Tom truly a victim in this, or was he orchestrating a narrative no one yet understood? The atmosphere in the station was tense, charged with a blend of hope and desperation. Detective Harris knew the clock was ticking, and every second counted in these critical first 48 hours. He called for a team meeting, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to focus on two main areas," Harris began, addressing his team. "First, we need to retrace Tom's steps in the market, talk to every vendor, every passerby. Second, dig into those sightings. Who saw him? When? Where?" Emma sat at the corner of the room, her eyes betraying a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Her thoughts were with her husband, the man she thought she knew. Was he hiding from something or someone? Or was this all a part of something more sinister? Outside, the sun beat down mercilessly as officers split into pairs to canvass the neighborhood. Detective Harris and his partner, Officer Ruiz, approached the small grocery store where Tom had allegedly been seen. The store owner, a portly man with a friendly demeanor, was eager to help. "Yeah, I remember him," the store owner said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "He'd come in every couple of weeks, always bought the same things: bread, canned goods, bottled water. Kind of like a man living off the grid." Harris exchanged a glance with Ruiz. This was more than a breadcrumb, it was a trail. "Did he ever speak to anyone or mention where he was staying?" Harris probed. The owner shook his head. "Nah, he kept to himself. But now that you mention it, there was something odd. He wore the same jacket every time, like it was a uniform or something." Emma, meanwhile, was back at the station, fielding questions from curious family members and concerned friends. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, each message a reminder of the life that had been turned upside down. Her eldest son, Mark, was especially insistent, demanding answers she didn't have. As the day wore on, a palpable frustration began to creep in. The team was working tirelessly, but the pieces weren't fitting together. The local shopkeeper's account was promising, yet it only deepened the mystery. How had Tom managed to stay under the radar for so long? A breakthrough came late in the afternoon when Officer Ruiz, returning from his rounds, mentioned a peculiar detail. One of the street vendors said he saw Tom talking to a man in a dark sedan parked near the market. They seemed to know each other. Harris's interest piqued. "Did he get a plate number or anything else?" Ruiz shook his head. "No, but he mentioned the car had a dent on the passenger side, said it looked pretty fresh." This was the first real lead, a tangible clue that could break the case open. Harris immediately ordered a search for similar cars in the area, hoping it would lead them to Tom or whoever might be involved in his disappearance. Emma felt a flicker of hope as she overheard the conversation. For the first time in years, she sensed they were closing in on the truth. But as Harris regrouped his team to plan the next steps, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if finding Tom only led to more questions? The market, once bustling, now felt like a stage, each vendor and passerby a potential actor, in a play whose script was still unwritten. As night began to fall, the team realized they had more to do, and that mistakes from the past were catching up to the present. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial that lay just beyond their reach. Was Tom truly a victim, or did he hold the key to a mystery that had only begun to unravel? The market lights dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like curious fingers over the cobblestones. Harris gathered his team, the air thick with anticipation, yet tinged with an unspoken anxiety. They had a lead, but it was fragile, like a spider's thread dangling over an abyss. With the description of the dark sedan and its dented passenger side, Harris dispatched officers to canvass nearby neighborhoods. Yet, as the night wore on, their efforts yielded little more than frustration. The city was a labyrinth of similar vehicles, each one a potential dead end. As the investigation intensified, whispers began to ripple through the community. Small-town rumors, once dormant, now flared up with a vengeance. Some speculated that Tom had gotten involved in something dangerous, perhaps with the wrong people. Others, who had long since resigned themselves to his absence, now wondered if he had simply chosen to disappear, leaving a life he no longer wanted. Emma, caught in the crossfire of speculation and memory, felt the weight of each theory like stones in her pocket. She recalled the early days of their marriage, the warmth of shared dreams now lost to the chill of uncertainty. What if they were chasing ghosts? What if Tom's reappearance was nothing more than a cruel twist of fate? In the days that followed, the investigation began to stall. Leads grew cold, and the initial surge of momentum slowed to a crawl. The dark sedan remained elusive, its driver a spectre in the shadows of a mystery that refused to be solved. The team, exhausted and deflated, turned their focus to potential suspects. There was Richard Collins, a former colleague of Tom's, who had left town abruptly around the same time Tom disappeared. His name surfaced in hushed conversations, his departure raising eyebrows and suspicions. Yet when Harris interviewed him, Richard's alibi held firm, his demeanor one of sincere bewilderment at the accusations. Then there was Lisa Turner, a local woman known for her sharp tongue and quick temper. She had been seen arguing with Tom at a community event a week before his disappearance, but Lisa, when questioned, produced convincing evidence that she had been out of state the day Tom vanished, visiting relatives for a birthday celebration. The list of suspects dwindled, each name crossed off with a growing sense of defeat. As days turned to weeks, the case, once a beacon of hope for Emma, now seemed to dim with the passage of time. The community's initial fervor faded, replaced by the mundane rhythm of daily life, where Tom's story was but a fleeting headline. For Emma, every unanswered question was a reminder of the years lost, of a life interrupted. She feared their search would end, not with answers but with more silence. Yet amid the despair, a quiet determination took root. She refused to let Tom become a footnote in his own story. As the sun set on another fruitless day, Harris paced his office, the echoes of his footsteps a testament to his frustration. They were missing something vital that lay just beyond their grasp. But what? He paused, staring out the window at the town below, its lights twinkling like stars against the encroaching darkness. And as he stood there, a question lingered, a whisper on the edge of consciousness. Who else had seen Tom that day? And what secrets were they hiding? The night stretched on, the answers elusive, but the search far from over. The team braced for the long road ahead, each step taken with the hope that the truth, however buried, would one day see the light. As dawn broke over the small town, casting a gentle glow over its streets, the investigation was at a standstill. Harris sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of case files and witness statements. Each document had been scrutinized, each lead pursued, yet the answers remained frustratingly out of reach. Emma, meanwhile, clung to the hope that had sustained her through the years. She spent her days revisiting places where Tom might have wandered, questioning locals, hoping to spark a memory or elicit a clue. Yet, with each passing day, the trail grew colder. Rumors began to swirl within the community, filling the void left by the lack of concrete evidence. Whispers of Tom's supposed gambling debts surfaced, painting a picture of a man desperate enough to vanish on his own terms. Others speculated about a secret life, citing Tom's frequent trips out of town for work as evidence of a double life. Harris, though skeptical of these rumors, knew they couldn't be dismissed outright. Every angle had to be explored, no matter how outlandish. He revisited the list of names, focusing on those who had been overlooked in the initial frenzy. Among them was Harold Jenkins, a neighbor who had always seemed too eager to help with the search. Harold was brought in for questioning. His manner was affable, his answers quick and seemingly honest, but something about his eagerness and the way he shifted in his seat when the questions became more pointed caught Harris's attention. Was it nervousness or something more? Despite his instincts, Harold's story checked out. He had been at a family gathering the day Tom disappeared, corroborated by multiple alibis. Left with no choice, Harris released him, frustration mounting as another lead slipped through his fingers. The case was losing momentum. Without new evidence or a breakthrough, the resources dedicated to Tom's disappearance began to wane. The community, once galvanized by the mystery, returned to their routines, the story of Tom's vanishing act fading into the background. Emma felt the weight of the silence more acutely than ever. Her once bustling home was now filled with echoes of the past, memories of laughter and love overshadowed by the specter of loss. The world moved on, but she was stuck in the moment of Tom's absence, unable to cross the threshold of hope into acceptance. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation grew colder. Harris, though determined, faced mounting pressure to close the case. Resources were scarce, and without a viable lead, he feared Tom's file would join the others in the cabinet marked unsolved. But even as the official investigation hit a wall, Emma refused to let Tom's story end in silence. She continued to search, driven by a belief that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And in her heart, she knew she'd never stop looking, not until Tom was found. Yet unknown to Emma and the investigators, a piece of the puzzle lay hidden in plain sight. A seemingly inconsequential detail buried amidst the clutter of Tom's life, waiting for someone to notice. As the town settled into the rhythm of a new day, the question lingered. What had they missed? The whispers started slowly, like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, growing louder with each passing day. In a town where secrets rarely stayed hidden, speculation about Tom's disappearance swirled, fueled by a lack of concrete evidence and the human need to fill a void with stories. The first suspect emerged from the shadows of gossip, a local man named Joel, known for his frequent clashes with Tom over business disagreements. Joel owned a struggling hardware store, and many believed he harbored a grudge against Tom, who had shifted his business elsewhere. The rumor mill churned, painting Joel as a man with a motive, perhaps desperate enough to make Tom disappear. Detective Harris, despite his reservations, had no choice but to investigate. He found Joel in the back of the store, surrounded by boxes of unsold inventory. The man appeared startled by the visit, his eyes darting nervously. Joel denied any involvement, his voice steady, but his hands betraying a slight tremor. He insisted he had been home the night Tom vanished, an alibi supported weakly by a neighbor who claimed to have seen his car parked outside. Harris left the interview unsatisfied, the pieces not fitting neatly into a puzzle. Joel's demeanor was suspicious, but nothing pointed definitively to guilt. Yet, rumors persisted, and in the absence of solid leads, the community latched onto the narrative, finding comfort in having a villain to blame. As the investigation dragged on without resolution, interest waned. The town's initial fervor cooled, their focus shifting back to the mundane concerns of daily life. Tom's story, once front-page news, slipped to the back pages, overshadowed by new headlines. The police resources allocated to the case dwindled, pressures from above forcing Harris to divert attention elsewhere. Emma, still a beacon of hope, felt the chill of the case going cold. Each day without answers felt like an eternity, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She combed through every detail of Tom's life, looking for patterns or anomalies that might have been overlooked. But the search was exhausting, and the lack of progress wore on her resolve. Among the community, other theories surfaced. Was it a robbery gone wrong, a crime of opportunity? Some suggested Tom had started a new life elsewhere, a theory Emma dismissed vehemently, knowing in her heart that Tom would never abandon his family willingly. Yet beneath the surface a truth simmered, something overlooked, a detail buried in the minutiae of everyday life. Emma, determined and relentless, continued to probe, her intuition telling her that the answer was within reach, hidden behind the veil of normalcy. As winter settled over the town, the case seemed destined to join the ranks of unsolved mysteries, a story whispered about in hushed tones rather than spoken aloud. But in the quiet, something stirred, a new perspective, a fresh pair of eyes, might soon bring the case back to life. And so the question remained, haunting those who dared to ponder it. What lay hidden in the shadows of Tom's disappearance, waiting to be discovered? In the years that followed Tom's disappearance, the town of Maplewood seemed to breathe an eerie sigh of relief, as if the collective anxiety had found a place to rest in the recesses of their minds. The town, like so many others, was adept at moving forward, the clockwork of daily life ticking along regardless of individual tragedy. For Emma, the absence of Tom was a wound that never healed, a constant ache that refused to be soothed. She became a fixture at the local library, spending countless hours poring over investigative books, articles, and any material that might spark an idea or lead. Her evenings were filled with the quiet hum of the internet, where she scoured forums dedicated to cold cases and missing persons, seeking solace and understanding from strangers who shared her plight. The community, once rallying behind Emma with casseroles and fundraising efforts, gradually turned to new causes. The annual fair, the renovation of the town hall, and the opening of a new school provided distractions, milestones that marked time in a way Tom's absence could not. Emma's children grew up in this shadow, their lives punctuated by the lingering question of their father's fate. They learned to navigate a world where their mother was both present and perpetually preoccupied, her heart split between the world they inhabited and the mystery she sought to unravel. Emma tried to shield them from the darkest possibilities, but children are perceptive, and the whispers they overheard at school or on the street seeped into their consciousness like a slow, insidious poison. Despite the years of silence, Emma refused to let the case fade entirely. She hired a private investigator, a grizzled former detective named Joe, whose reputation for dogged persistence was well known in the region. Joe approached the case with a fresh perspective, scrutinizing every detail with a meticulous eye. His presence was a beacon of hope for Emma, a reminder that someone else believed in the possibility of finding the truth. Yet, as months turned into years, even Joe's optimism waned. Leads turned into dead ends, witnesses' memories grew hazy, and the trail that might have seemed promising once was now cold and unyielding. Emma and Joe met regularly, their strategy sessions becoming more about maintaining hope than uncovering new information. In the quiet moments when the house was still and the weight of her solitude pressed hardest, Emma would sit by the window, staring out into the darkness. The unanswered questions circled her mind relentlessly. Had Tom been taken against his will? Was he living a life she couldn't fathom somewhere out there? Or worse, had he met a fate too grim to imagine? Through it all, a small part of Emma held on to the belief that Tom was alive, that one day he would walk through the door and the nightmare would end. But as time marched on, even her most hopeful thoughts were tinged with doubt. The town of Maplewood continued to evolve. New families moved in, and old stories faded into the background. But for Emma, the narrative had never changed. It was a story she lived and breathed, a relentless pursuit of answers that consumed her waking hours and haunted her dreams. And then, one crisp autumn morning, as the leaves turned the color of embers, Joe called with a tremor in his voice she hadn't heard before. There was something new, a detail unearthed that might just reignite the investigation. Emma's heart raced with the possibility, a flicker of hope in the long silence. What had Joe found? And could it finally point them to what lay hidden in the shadows of Tom's disappearance? Emma clutched the phone tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Joe's voice crackled through the line, filled with an urgency that neither time nor disappointment had dulled. "I know it's been years, Emma, but I think I found something that could change everything. It's about Tom's last known whereabouts." Emma's mind raced back to that fateful day at the market, the moment that had shattered her world. She remembered every detail, every face, every corner of the bustling square. Yet in all her recollections, there had been nothing unusual, nothing that could have foretold the years of uncertainty that would follow. Joe continued, his words tumbling over one another. "There's a witness who came forward, someone new. He claims he saw Tom speaking with a man near the edge of the market just before he disappeared." Emma's breath hitched. After all these years, a new witness? How could this be possible? "He was just passing through town back then," Joe explained. "He's been living out of state and only recently heard about the case. Said it's been eating at him ever since." Emma's pulse quickened. Could this be the break they needed? She had spent the better part of a decade clinging to every thread, every whisper of hope, only to watch them unravel before her eyes. But this felt different. "What did he see?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He saw Tom with a man, someone he described as tall with a distinctive scar on his right cheek. They were arguing, it seemed intense, but then they just walked off together. A scar." Emma's mind raced through the faces she had known, the acquaintances and strangers who had drifted through their lives over the years, but nothing matched, no one stood out. "Emma," Joe's voice softened, "I know this is a lot, but I think it's worth looking into. I've asked the witness to come in to give a formal statement. We might finally have a lead that points in a direction we've never considered." The room seemed to close in around her, the walls echoing with the silence of the years gone by. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions. Hope, fear, anticipation, they all swirled within her, a tangled knot she could barely unravel. "I'll be there," she said finally, determination lacing her words. "Whatever it takes, Joe. I need to know. We need to know." As she hung up the phone, Emma glanced out the window, the vibrant autumn hues a stark contrast to the greyness that had settled over her life. The long silence had been deafening, but maybe, just maybe, it was about to be shattered. With renewed resolve, she prepared for what lay ahead. The years of solitude had not broken her spirit. If anything, they had forged it with steel. She would not rest until she knew the truth of what happened to Tom, until the shadows that had haunted them were finally dispelled by the light of answers. The chilling winds of autumn brushed past Emma as she stood outside the precinct, her breath visible in the crisp air. She clutched her coat tighter, the weight of the years pressing down upon her. Each step towards the entrance felt like a journey through time, traversing the echoes of lost days and forgotten nights. Inside, the atmosphere was buzzing with the hum of activity, a stark contrast to the stagnant silence that had filled her life for so long. Emma was greeted by Joe, his face a mix of concern and determination. They exchanged a brief nod, an unspoken understanding passing between them. As they made their way to the small interview room, Emma's mind drifted back to the early days of Tom's disappearance, the initial panic, the frantic calls, the endless waiting for a breakthrough that never came. Those days had stretched into years, each one adding a layer to the fortress of resilience she had built around herself. In the room, the witness sat nervously at the table, his eyes darting around as if the walls held secrets of their own. Emma took a seat opposite him, her gaze steady and unwavering. Joe introduced them, his voice calm and reassuring. Emma listened intently as the witness recounted his memory of seeing Tom and the man with the scar. His voice was steady, yet tinged with the uncertainty that time often brings. But there was a glimmer of truth in his words, a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. As he spoke, Emma's mind was a whirl of possibilities. Who was this man with the scar? How had he slipped through the cracks of their desperate search? Her thoughts raced back to every lead, every clue that had led them nowhere. But now, after years of silence, they had something concrete, a thread to pull at in the tangled web of Tom's disappearance. The interview drew to a close, and Emma thanked the witness, her gratitude genuine and profound. As he left the room, Joe turned to her, his eyes reflecting the shared burden they carried. "We have a direction now, Emma. It's more than we've had in years." His words were a balm to her weary soul. Emma nodded, her resolve unyielding. The years had not been kind, but they had not broken her either. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that she was no longer alone in her quest for the truth. As she stepped back into the chilly autumn afternoon, Emma felt a shift within her. The long silence was no longer a void. It was a space filled with potential, with the possibility of answers. The journey was far from over, but she was prepared to see it through to the end. With Joe by her side, and a renewed sense of purpose, Emma knew that the shadows of the past were beginning to recede. The silence had been shattered, and in its place was the promise of resolution, the chance to finally uncover the truth that had eluded them for so long. And as she walked away from the precinct, Emma carried with her the hope that the years of silence would soon give way to the sound of justice being served. The crisp autumn air wrapped around Emma and Joe as they walked down the precinct steps, their footsteps echoing with a newfound determination. The witness's account had rekindled a fire that had long been smouldering under the weight of unanswered questions and false leads. Yet the years of silence had left their mark, an indelible reminder of the pain and patience forged in the crucible of uncertainty. Emma recalled the day Tom vanished as if it were yesterday. The market, bustling with life and color, had been a scene of ordinary chaos. But within moments her world had crumbled. Tom's absence had been like a gaping hole, one she had tried to fill with memories and hope. As days turned to years, the initial frantic search evolved into a quiet, enduring struggle, marked by sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows. The community, once abuzz with empathy and support, had eventually moved on. Faces that once bore expressions of concern now wore the mask of acceptance, a reluctant resignation to the unsolved mystery that had become part of local law. Emma had watched as the town wrapped itself in the comforting shroud of routine, the memory of Tom's disappearance fading like a whisper in the wind. Joe, her steadfast ally, had been a constant throughout. Together they had pored over files, revisited old haunts, and chased whispers of sightings that led nowhere. Their personal investigation was a testament to their unwavering dedication, but had been fraught with dead ends and deceit. The years had not only tested their resolve, but had forged an unbreakable bond between them, a shared mission that transcended the bounds of friendship. Emma's family had also suffered under the weight of the long silence. Her parents, once vibrant and hopeful, had grown weary and withdrawn. Their lives had become a landscape of lost opportunities and postponed dreams, the shadow of Tom's absence casting a pall over every family gathering. Emma had become the unspoken pillar of strength, her determination a beacon for those who had all but given up. Despite the passage of time, a small group of supporters had remained by Emma's side. They were the ones who still whispered prayers for Tom's return, who lit candles on anniversaries, and who stood beside her at every press conference and community event. Their loyalty was a balm to her soul, a reminder that she was not alone in her quest for answers. As Emma and Joe walked in silence, both lost in their thoughts, the magnitude of their journey settled upon them. The years of silence had been an endurance test, but now, with a new lead in hand, there was a glimmer of hope. Emma knew that this was their moment, a chance to reignite the investigation, to breathe life into a case that had grown cold with time. Reaching the street corner, Joe paused, his gaze meeting Emma's with a mixture of resolve and empathy. They were on the cusp of something significant, yet the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty and potential heartache. Emma, sensing the weight of the moment, spoke softly, her voice carrying the strength of the years behind them. "We owe it to Tom, to ourselves, to see this through, no matter what it takes." Joe nodded, his expression mirroring her determination. "We've come this far, Emma. We're not turning back now." With renewed purpose, they turned away from the precinct, ready to dive back into the depths of the mystery. The years of silence had not been in vain. They had been a crucible, shaping them for the challenge that lay ahead. And as they walked into the fading light of the autumn afternoon, Emma felt the stirrings of something she had almost forgotten, the belief that, at the end of this long, arduous journey, they would find the truth. Emma and Joe had barely reached the end of the block when their phones buzzed simultaneously. It was a message from Detective Sarah Nolan, a name unfamiliar to them, but one that would soon become synonymous with hope and tenacity. The message was brief, yet brimming with the promise of change. New developments in Tom's case, urgent meeting requested. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. They exchanged a glance, the weight of anticipation settling over them like a heavy quilt. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for, a chance to breathe new life into the search for Tom. Emma's heart raced with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Who was this detective, and what could she possibly know that others had overlooked for so many years? The night was a blur of restless dreams and whispered reassurances. By dawn, the air was thick with unspoken questions. As they made their way to the precinct the following morning, a nervous energy crackled between them. Detective Nolan met them with a firm handshake and an air of quiet confidence. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, suggested a mind always at work, always piecing together the fragments of truth hidden in the shadows. She wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter. "Emma, Joe, thank you for coming on such short notice. I won't keep you in suspense. I recently came across a development that might change everything." Emma leaned forward, her breath caught in her throat. "What is it, Detective?" Nolan paused, her expression grave yet hopeful. "We're applying a new forensic technology, genetic genealogy, to the evidence we collected years ago. It's a relatively new field, but it has solved cases thought unsolvable." Joe's skeptical eyebrow raised slightly. "Genetic genealogy. How does that work?" The detective explained, her words weaving a tapestry of science and possibility. "Essentially, we're using DNA collected from the scene and comparing it to publicly available genetic databases. This could potentially connect us to a relative of the person we're searching for, leading us to our suspect. Emma's mind raced with the implications. Could this be the breakthrough they had been praying for all these years? A way to finally unravel the tangled web of uncertainty that had ensnared Tom's fate. Detective Nolan's voice softened, her empathy palpable. I know this has been a long and painful journey for you both. And while I can't promise immediate results, this technology has already made significant strides in other cold cases. There's a real possibility we could find something, a connection, a clue, that we missed before. Emma felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a fragile flame that could either light their path or be snuffed out by disappointment. She nodded, her voice steady, despite the storm of emotions churning inside. Thank you, Detective. We appreciate everything you're doing. Joe added, his tone a mix of optimism and caution. We know it's a long shot, but it's the best shot we've had in a while. We're ready for whatever comes next. As they left the precinct, a new sense of purpose guided their steps. The investigation was no longer a distant, forlorn whisper. It was a living, breathing quest with real potential. And for the first time in years, Emma dared to imagine a future where they might finally know the truth. Yet as they stepped back into the sunlight, a question lingered unspoken between them. What if the truth they uncovered was more devastating than the silence they had endured? As the sun cast long shadows on the pavement, Emma and Joe walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The question loomed large, an uninvited spectre in their newfound hope. They had to know the truth, whatever the cost. Days turned into weeks, and while the anticipation was excruciating, Emma found solace in the fact that their case was once again active, a living entity rather than a forgotten file collecting dust. Detective Nolan was relentless, her team poring over every piece of evidence with the precision of a surgeon. Then, one late afternoon, just as the sky began to blush with the colors of dusk, the phone rang. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the number. She exchanged a glance with Joe, who nodded, his eyes mirroring her mix of anxiety and hope. Detective Nolan's voice was calm, but carried an undertone of urgency. Emma, we have something. It's not a full answer, but it's a thread we can pull. The genetic genealogy analysis came back with a potential match. It's a distant relative, possibly a third cousin. We're looking into it now, trying to make connections. Emma's breath caught in her throat. A relative, what does this mean? It means we're closer than we've ever been. This relative might know something or lead us to someone who does. We're dispatching officers to speak with them, but I wanted you to know right away. A glimmer of hope shone brighter in Emma's chest, pushing aside the shadows of uncertainty. Thank you, Detective. Please keep us updated. As she ended the call, her hands trembled slightly. Joe took them in his own, grounding her in the reality of the moment. We're getting closer, Emma. I can feel it. Emma nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I just hope it leads us to answers, not more questions. The days following the call were a whirlwind of cautious optimism. Detective Nolan kept them informed as her team traced the family tree, mapping connections with meticulous care. Each call brought them closer, like a puzzle slowly coming together. Finally, a breakthrough. A name surfaced, a name that had never come up in the original investigation. A man who had lived in the same town as Tom, who had no apparent connection to him, yet shared a bloodline through the labyrinth of distant relatives. Detective Nolan dug deeper, her team uncovering that this man, Robert Albright, had recently moved out of state, living a quiet life under the radar. Suspicious, given the circumstances, but not incriminating in itself. Yet as they delved into Robert's past, inconsistencies began to emerge. Gaps in his timeline, unexplained absences that coincided with Tom's disappearance. Emma and Joe could feel the momentum building, a crescendo of revelations that promised to either bring closure or shatter their fragile hope. As they sat by the phone waiting for the next call, the question returned, insistent and unyielding. What if the truth was more devastating than the silence? The next call would change everything. Detective Nolan's voice was charged with excitement, the kind that comes from knowing you're on the brink of something monumental. Emma, Joe, we need you to come down to the station. "We've found something, and I think you need to see this for yourself." As they made their way to the precinct, the air seemed charged with electricity, every step echoing with the weight of possibility. They were on the edge of the truth, and whatever it held, they were ready to face it together. As Emma and Joe stepped into the precinct, the sterile chill of the room seemed to amplify the anticipation thrumming in their veins. Detective Nolan greeted them with a nod, her expression a blend of intensity and reassurance. She guided them through the labyrinth of desks to a quiet conference room where a large screen dominated the wall. On the screen was a web of photographs and documents, each connected by lines and annotations, a tapestry of investigation that had grown over weeks of painstaking work. At its center was a portrait of Tom, surrounded by names and faces they had never seen before. "This," Nolan began, pointing to a photograph of a middle-aged man with deep-set eyes and a wary expression, "is Robert Albright. We've been able to connect him to Tom through genetic genealogy, but that's not all." She tapped a few keys and the screen shifted to a new document. It was an old police report, yellowed with age and filled with scrawled notes. "During our investigation, we uncovered a series of unsolved burglaries and assaults in the area around the time Tom disappeared. Robert was a suspect, but the cases were never tied together." Emma leaned forward, her heart pounding. "What does this mean for Tom?" Nolan's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "We believe Robert might have been involved in more than just those crimes. There's a strong possibility he was connected to Tom's disappearance. We've found a piece of fabric at one of the crime scenes that matches fibers from a jacket Tom wore the day he went missing." Joe's voice cracked with emotion as he asked, "Why wasn't this found before?" "Back then, forensic technology wasn't as advanced," Nolan explained. "But now, with new techniques in genetic genealogy and DNA profiling, we've been able to link these pieces together." Emma felt a glimmer of hope ignite within her. "So, what now?" Detective Nolan's voice was firm, filled with resolve. "We're bringing Robert in for questioning. We have enough to warrant it. But we need you both to be prepared. This could be a long process, and the outcome might not be what we hope for." Joe squeezed Emma's hand, their shared determination a silent vow. "We're ready, whatever it takes." As they left the precinct, the weight of possibility settled around them like a mantle. They were no longer in the dark, stumbling through unanswered questions. A path had begun to form, guided by the light of truth's dawning. But as they stepped into the bright afternoon sun, a new question lingered in the air, heavy with implications. If Robert was indeed connected to Tom's disappearance, who else might have been involved? What shadows still lurked in the past, waiting to be uncovered? The answers lay ahead, in a future that was suddenly more uncertain and more hopeful than ever before. As Emma and Joe walked out into the afternoon sun, the weight of their newfound hope mingled with the anxiety of what lay ahead. Their minds whirred with possibilities, each question spiraling into another. Behind them, the precinct doors closed with a heavy thud, a sound that seemed to echo the gravity of what they were about to face. The next day, the investigation team, led by Detective Nolan, convened in a sterile, brightly lit lab. Screens flickered with data, and the hum of machinery underscored the tense atmosphere. The team was on the brink of a breakthrough, and everyone could feel it. A forensic analyst, her eyes sharp behind thin glasses, approached Nolan with a small evidence bag. Inside was the piece of fabric, a seemingly innocuous swatch, now a key to unlocking a decade-old mystery. She spoke with a mix of excitement and caution. "We've managed to extract some viable DNA from the fabric. It's not much, but with the advancements in genetic genealogy, we might be able to trace it back to a relevant lineage." Nolan's heart quickened. This was the kind of lead that could pivot the entire investigation. "How soon can we get results?" "The process is delicate, but we should have some preliminary data by tomorrow." As the team worked late into the night, the lab became a crucible of anticipation. Each step forward in the analysis brought them closer to an answer, closer to unraveling the truth that had eluded them for so long. The following day, as promised, the analyst returned with a file in hand. Her expression was resolute, but tinged with the gravity of what she was about to reveal. "We managed to trace the DNA to a family tree," she announced, capturing the attention of the room. The lineage links back to the same surname as Robert, but there's more. Nolan leaned in, the air around him charged with suspense. Go on. The genetic markers indicate a close familial match, a brother possibly. This could mean Robert wasn't alone in this. A palpable silence fell over the room. The implications were staggering. If Robert had an accomplice, it complicated the narrative they were piecing together. Yet this was the lead they needed, a thread to pull on that might unravel the entire tapestry of deception. Emma and Joe sat in their living room, the phone between them, waiting for an update from Nolan. When it finally rang, they exchanged a glance, bracing themselves for the news. Emma picked up, her voice steady but laced with tension. Detective Nolan. Emma, we've made a significant breakthrough. Nolan's voice crackled through the line, carrying with it the weight of discovery. We believe Robert had help, possibly a brother. We're looking into his family connections now. Emma's heart skipped a beat. It was a twist she hadn't expected, a new layer to the mystery that both intensified and expanded the narrative of Tom's disappearance. What does this mean for finding Tom? It means we're closer than ever to understanding what happened. We're following every lead, and this could finally provide the closure you've been seeking. As Emma relayed the information to Joe, their resolve hardened. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time it felt navigable. They were no longer bound by the darkness of not knowing. They were on the threshold of truth, and nothing would deter them from crossing it. Yet, as they steeled themselves for the next steps, the question that had lingered before now pressed with even greater urgency. If Robert wasn't working alone, how deep did this conspiracy run? And as the answers loomed closer, so too did the shadow of unspoken threats, a reminder that truth, while liberating, also demanded its price. Emma hung up the phone, her hand trembling slightly as she processed the latest revelation. The idea of Robert having a brother or an accomplice shifted the paradigm entirely. She turned to Joe, her eyes a mix of determination and fear. We need to find out more about Robert's family, she said, her voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. If there's a brother, he might hold the key to everything. Joe nodded, his mind racing. Let's start by digging into Robert's background, see if we can trace any siblings or close relatives. The next few days were a blur of research and phone calls. With the help of Detective Nolan, they uncovered fragments of Robert's past, piecing together a family tree that had been obscured by time and secrecy. It was a tedious process, but each new discovery fueled their resolve. Then a breakthrough. Nolan called with an update that sent a jolt of adrenaline through both Emma and Joe. "We found a birth record," Nolan announced, his tone urgent. "Robert has a brother named Daniel. It seems he changed his last name years ago, which is why he wasn't on our radar initially." Emma felt a rush of clarity. "And where is Daniel now?" "That's the catch," Nolan replied, the tension in his voice palpable. "He's been living off the grid for years, but we have a possible location. It's a small town in Montana, secluded enough that he could easily hide there." As Nolan laid out the plan to track Daniel down, the gravity of their pursuit settled over Emma and Joe. They were closing in on a truth that had eluded them for years, yet with each step forward, the risks grew more pronounced. The team decided to send an undercover operative to Montana, someone who could blend in and observe without raising suspicion. The operation required precision and care. Any misstep could tip off Daniel, causing him to vanish once more. Days turned into a tense waiting game, the silence punctuated only by updates from Nolan as the operative settled into the town, gathering intel. Then, a call came in the dead of night, jarring Emma and Joe from a restless sleep. "It's Nolan," the detective's voice was a whisper, heavy with anticipation. "Our operative made contact. Daniel's there, but he's not alone. He's been seen with another man who fits Robert's description." Emma's heart raced. The pieces were falling into place, the puzzle that had confounded them for so long finally revealing its image. Yet, with this revelation, came a chilling realization. They were dealing with two men capable of anything, men who had evaded justice for years. Joe spoke, his voice low and firm. "We need to be ready for anything, Emma. This isn't just about finding Tom anymore. It's about ensuring justice is served." Emma nodded, her resolve unshaken. "We're so close, Joe. We can't turn back now." As they prepared for the next steps, the weight of the unknown pressed down on them. The path to truth was fraught with danger, but the promise of closure and justice drove them forward. The stage was set for a confrontation that could finally lay the past to rest, but the question lingered: at what cost? In the quiet of their living room, Emma and Joe held on to each other, the knowledge that they were closer than ever to the truth, both a comfort and a source of fear. The shadows of the past loomed large, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. In the dim glow of their living room, Emma and Joe clung to a fragile sense of hope. The next few days passed in a blur, a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Every moment was consumed by the weight of what lay ahead. Emma pored over maps and profiles, while Joe coordinated closely with Nolan, refining the plan to ensure no stone was left unturned. As dawn broke on the day of the operation, the team assembled, their expressions a mix of determination and trepidation. The plan was intricate, hinging on timing and precision, with each member knowing their role in the delicate dance that would unfold. The goal was clear: gather irrefutable evidence to finally bring Daniel and his accomplice to justice. A specialized team was tasked with securing the perimeter, ensuring no escape routes were left unguarded. Meanwhile, Nolan prepared to oversee the operation from a mobile command unit, his eyes glued to the array of monitors displaying live feeds from strategically placed cameras around the small Montana town. Emma, though not on the ground, played a crucial role. Her deep understanding of the case, the nuances of each player's involvement, provided the team with invaluable insights. Her voice crackled over the radio, guiding the operatives with a calm authority that belied the storm of emotions within. In the meantime, the forensic team had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, utilizing advancements in technology to analyze the scant evidence collected over the years. A breakthrough had been made. A partial fingerprint lifted from a long-forgotten piece of evidence matched Daniel. This match was the key, providing the legal leverage needed to move forward with the operation. As the sun reached its zenith, the moment of truth approached. The operative, who had seamlessly ingrained himself into the community, was tasked with drawing Daniel out. It was a delicate act requiring both subtlety and courage. As he engaged Daniel in casual conversation outside the local diner, the tension was palpable, each word a step closer to the inevitable confrontation. Inside the mobile command unit, the air was thick with anticipation. Nolan's eyes flicked between the screens, watching as Daniel's demeanor shifted, suspicion beginning to cloud his features. The operative's voice came through softly, barely a whisper. "He's getting nervous. I think he suspects something." Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was the critical point, the moment that could make or break the operation. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke into the headset. "Stay calm. We've got your back." The next few moments stretched into eternity, each second a taut wire straining under the weight of possibility. Then, the unexpected. Robert appeared, his presence a catalyst that sent shockwaves through the carefully orchestrated plan. He approached Daniel, his expression unreadable, but there was no doubt they were in this together. Nolan's voice cut through the tension. "All units, be ready. This is it." The operatives moved swiftly, executing the plan with precision honed through countless hours of preparation. As Daniel and Robert realized the net closing in, panic flared in their eyes. They made a break for it, the chase unfolding in a blur of adrenaline and urgency. Emma and Joe listened intently, their hearts in their throats. This was the culmination of years of heartache and relentless pursuit. The airwaves crackled with updates, each word a step closer to closure. Finally, Nolan's voice broke through, filled with a mixture of relief and triumph. "We've got them, both in custody, it's over." Emma and Joe exhaled, the weight of countless sleepless nights and unanswered questions lifting ever so slightly. Yet, even as the first taste of justice settled over them, new questions loomed on the horizon. Would the truth finally be revealed, and would it bring the peace they so desperately sought? In the dimly lit confines of the mobile command unit, the atmosphere was electric with a sense of accomplishment. Yet beneath the surface, a simmering tension remained. Emma and Joe exchanged a glance, their eyes reflecting both relief and the unyielding drive to uncover the full truth. As Daniel and Robert sat in separate interrogation rooms, the stark contrast between their public personas and their hidden lives began to unravel. Daniel, known in the community as a devoted family man and successful businessman, appeared disheveled, his veneer of respectability shattered. Robert, a long-standing church elder revered for his charitable deeds, sat quietly, the weight of his double life pressing heavily upon him. Emma's voice pierced the silence, steady and probing. "We need to understand how they managed to deceive everyone for so long." Joe nodded, his mind racing through the years of clues that had led them to this moment. "It's almost inconceivable. They were hiding in plain sight, right under our noses." The interrogation room buzzed with tension as Nolan prepared to confront Daniel. The seasoned detective's gaze was unwavering, his voice calm but firm. "Daniel, you know why you're here. It's time to come clean." Daniel's eyes flickered with a mix of defiance and fear. He remained silent, the seconds ticking by as if they were hours. Nolan leaned in, his tone softening, yet resolute. "We know about the market trip. We know your wife saw you, and we know why you ran." Finally, Daniel's resolve began to crack. His shoulders slumped, the weight of his secrets too much to bear. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Meanwhile, in Robert's room, Emma and Joe watched the live feed intently. Robert sat motionless, his facade crumbling. Emma's voice, though gentle, carried an unmistakable urgency. "Robert, you held the community's trust. Why betray that?" Robert's eyes, once sharp and calculating, now appeared haunted. "I didn't plan any of this," he confessed, his words tumbling out in a rush. It all spiraled out of control. As the confessions unfolded, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. Daniel and Robert had been partners in a scheme that had gone awry, their greed and desperation weaving a tangled web of deceit. The market sighting had been a catalyst, forcing their hand and ultimately leading to their downfall. Outside the interrogation rooms, Emma and Joe conferred with Nolan. The truth, though painful, was finally emerging. Yet as they pieced together the timeline of betrayal and deceit, a new, unsettling question loomed. Were there others involved? And if so, how deep did the conspiracy run? Emma's voice, though weary, carried a steely determination. "We need to dig deeper. This is just the beginning." As the team prepared to delve further into the investigation, the gravity of the situation settled over them. They were on the brink of uncovering a network of corruption that reached far beyond what they had initially imagined. The room was silent as they contemplated their next move, each aware that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for Emma, Joe, and the others, there was no turning back. The pursuit of justice demanded nothing less. And so, as the dawn of a new day broke, they steeled themselves for the revelations yet to come, determined to see this case through to its final, inevitable conclusion. The dawn's light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room where Emma, Joe, and Nolan sat. The air was thick with anticipation, a charged silence hanging between them. Outside, the world continued in its mundane rhythm, unaware of the seismic shifts occurring within these walls. In the interrogation room, Robert's resolve crumbled further. Alone with his thoughts, he seemed to age decades in mere minutes. The weight of years of deceit bore down upon him, and with a deep, shuddering breath, he began to speak. "It was never supposed to end like this," Robert confessed, his voice a raspy whisper. "Daniel and I, we thought we could outsmart everyone. It started small, just a little money here, a little there. But then we got greedy." Emma listened intently, her eyes never leaving Robert's. "What about the others, Robert? Were there more of you?" Robert hesitated, his gaze darting to the mirrored glass behind which he sensed Joe and Nolan's presence. His shoulders slumped as he nodded. "There were others," he admitted, "but they were just pawns. They didn't know the full scope of what we were doing." As Robert's confession continued, Emma's mind raced. Each revelation was a thread, unraveling the tapestry of corruption. She felt a sickening mix of triumph and despair as the extent of the conspiracy was laid bare. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room, Daniel sat silently, his own confession mirroring Robert's. The two men, once bound by their shared secrets, were now isolated in their guilt. The arrests that followed were swift. Law enforcement moved quickly, rounding up the minor players in the scheme. The community, once blissfully unaware, was thrust into a maelstrom of media frenzy and public outrage. The trial, a spectacle of justice, was set to be one of the largest in the region's history. Public interest was at an all-time high, and the courtroom buzzed with tension. As the proceedings unfolded, Emma and Joe watched from the gallery, their work now in the hands of the justice system. Robert and Daniel's testimonies were damning, each man attempting to mitigate his own culpability. But the evidence, painstakingly gathered by Emma and her team, was irrefutable. The jury returned with a verdict of guilty on all charges, and both men were sentenced to life in prison. For Emma, the conclusion of the case brought little solace. The community was left to grapple with the betrayal, and the families of those involved faced an uncertain future. Yet amidst the pain and disillusionment, there was a glimmer of hope, a renewed faith in the power of justice and the resilience of the human spirit. Emma stood outside the courthouse, the cool breeze a balm against the emotional storm within. As she reflected on the case, a sense of closure began to settle over her. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had also been a testament to the strength of those who refused to let the truth remain buried. In the end, justice had prevailed, though not without cost. The community, once fractured, began to heal, united by a shared determination to rebuild and move forward. And for Emma, Joe, and Nolan, the case was a reminder of why they had chosen this path, a commitment to truth and the unwavering belief in the power of memory to shape a better future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a warm, golden glow, Emma walked away from the courthouse with a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay in wait, driven by the stories yet to be told and the justice yet to be served.